Welcome to this Explainer, guys. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are taking a trip. But, not just any trip. We're going to dive right past those glossy, perfectly curated Instagram filters to uncover the real, the gritty, and the absolutely fascinating truth about one of the most famous Greek islands out there. Yep, we're deconstructing the postcard image of Santorini. Here's our quick itinerary for today's deep dive. We'll start by looking beyond that postcard image, explore how the island is literally built on a volcano, and taste some traditional taverna dishes. Then, we'll check out the safe, sleepless nightlife, chase down that world-famous sunset, and finally break down the actual cost of visiting. Let's get right into it.
Okay, Section 1, Beyond the Postcard Image.
So, pretty much the entire globe knows this gorgeous place as Santorini, right? Well, here's a fun fact to kick things off. If you actually look at official maps or your flight tickets, the island's official name is Thera. And just to make it a little more confusing for us, its capital town is called Fira. But hey, brand recognition is an incredibly powerful thing. So to the millions who visit, it's always going to be Santorini.
And speaking of those millions of visitors, grab onto something because the number is wild. 100,000. That is the staggering, literally jaw-dropping number of tourists that flood this place every single day during the peak summer months. To put that into perspective, you've got those 100,000 daily tourists sharing a tiny strip of land with merely 15,000 permanent residents. And when I say tiny, I mean the entire island is just 76 square kilometers. We're talking a maximum of 12 kilometers wide. It's so small. This massive influx completely transforms the daily reality, the local infrastructure, and the whole vibe of this tiny little rock in the Aegean Sea. Moving right along to Section 2, Built on a Volcano. This is where things get a little dark and dramatic. The island was actually formed around 1600 BC by literally the largest volcanic explosion in recorded human history. It's wild to think about. This massive eruption completely swallowed up entire Bronze Age villages, burying them deep beneath the earth. So all those millions of tourists partying, eating, and sleeping, they're doing it right on top of a dormant volcano that scientists are actually still actively monitoring today. No way, right?
Keeping that intense, harsh environment in mind, I gotta ask you a classic question. Why do you think all the houses in Santorini are painted white and blue? We all know that iconic look, right? But I promise you, the answer is rooted in pure, gritty survival, not just because it looks great on a postcard.
Okay, so it all comes down to functionality. Early islanders obviously didn't have air conditioning, so they painted their houses white using lime paint. Why? To reflect that brutal, relentless Mediterranean heat. But here's the really fascinating part. Lime actually acts as a natural antibacterial disinfectant, which was absolutely crucial for preventing the spread of disease in these tightly packed villages. Over time, those iconic blue domes were added in, and eventually the whole color scheme evolved to match Greece's national flag. It was basically the super ingenious survival tactic that just accidentally became a global architectural icon. And building on that harsh volcanic reality, there are literally zero natural rivers on the island. Almost no rainfall either. Back in the day, everything had to be imported. Even today, all the drinking water has to be desalinated from the surrounding sea. And because the volcanic terrain was so rugged and completely lacked modern roads, donkeys were the go-to traditional transport for hauling goods. That's exactly why you'll see donkey statues and donkey-themed souvenirs absolutely everywhere. It's the locals' way of honoring the animals that literally kept the island alive. Let's shift gears to Section 3, Traditional Tastes and Taverns. So whenever you visit, you are definitely going to be eating at a taverna. A taverna is basically a traditional, usually family-owned Greek restaurant, and they can be decades or even centuries old. But what's super interesting here is the linguistic connection. The word taverna actually shares a Persian root meaning a tavern, a bar, or a place to drink. It really just shows the deep, incredibly interconnected history of this whole region. Now, because farming on a volcano is, as you can imagine, super difficult, locals have to rely on highly specific crops that actually thrive in the volcanic ash. Take Santorini fava beans, for example. They aren't what you're probably picturing. They're actually this rich, delicious paste made from yellow split peas and olive oil. Then you've got the famous tomato balls. These are deep-fried fritters made exclusively from special cherry tomatoes that literally only grow in the island's unique volcanic dirt. Add in a savory spanakopita, that's a traditional spinach and feta pie, and finish the whole shebang with galaktoboureko. It's a dessert that's kind of like a hybrid of baklava and a really thick sweet custard. The whole menu is just an absolute masterclass in making the absolute most out of very limited resources.
And to wash all that amazing food down, you gotta grab a Freddo espresso. It's actually a relatively modern invention from around 1990. Basically, a freshly brewed, ice-cold espresso topped with this thick, frothy layer of foam. It's universally hailed as the ultimate Greek summer drink. Seriously, when you're walking around the island under that blazing sun, you'll see almost everyone holding one of these just to stay energized.
All right, moving on to Section 4. Safe, sleepless, and diverse.
Now, a travel vlogger recently pointed out a truly fascinating reality about global migration here. Among the thousands of locals and tourists, you'll actually find this incredibly thriving South Asian community. You've got workers from places like Lahore in Pakistan and Bangladesh running the shops and restaurants. They're speaking Urdu and Hindi, completely bridging this massive cultural gap right in this remote little corner of Europe. It's so cool to see how culture spreads.
And honestly, that diverse workforce is totally essential, because this island simply does not sleep. I mean it. Supermarkets, these massive bakeries, and the clubs, they're open 24/7. But the most crucial thing to take away here is the atmosphere. It's this wild, sleepless party environment, but it somehow maintains an incredible level of safety. Solo female travelers can walk through these narrow, quiet little alleys at 2 a.m. with complete peace of mind and just total personal freedom. It's a really rare balance of nonstop energy and supreme safety.
Let's head into Section 5, the world's most famous sunset.
Before you go chasing that famous sunset, though, you really need to know this highly confusing local secret. The most famous village for the sunset is spelled O-I-A, but, plot twist, it is pronounced Ia. The O is completely silent. If you don't know this, you might literally miss your bus, because the conductors will be at the terminal screaming, Ia, Ia, and you'll just be standing there wondering where on earth your bus to OEA is. Don't be that guy.
I gotta be honest with you, witnessing this sunset requires some extreme dedication. Think about this timeline. You have to arrive around 5 p.m. just to beat the traffic. By 7 p.m., you absolutely must secure your spot at the famous castle ruins, and then you literally just sit there guarding your 1 square foot of space for 2 solid hours packed in with thousands of other people. Finally, around 9 p.m., the sun dips down into the Aegean Sea, and the entire crowd just erupts into wild applause and cheering. It is this massive, crazy, collective human experience.
And finally, Section 6, the real cost of Santorini.
Okay, let's bring it back to reality and break down the hard numbers. A quick 50-minute low-cost flight from Athens can be as cheap as 45 euros. A hostel bed, that's going to run you around 30 euros a night. The local bus from the airport to the city center is just 2.2 euros. And a really hearty dinner of traditional food at a taverna plus water will cost about 20 euros. So, if you plan it right, a quick trip from Athens can cost you around 160 to 170 euros in total. That's roughly 15,000 Indian rupees. It just goes to show that visiting this seemingly ultra-luxurious, exclusive destination can actually be surprisingly accessible if you're smart about it.
So all of this brings us to the ultimate question: is the world's most famous sunset actually worth the trip? You've got the crushing crowds of 100,000 daily tourists, the blistering Mediterranean heat, and hours of just waiting around. But on the flip side, you have this deep, incredible Bronze Age history, brilliant architecture born purely out of survival, and a stunning volcanic landscape that quite literally rose from the ashes. It's a lot to weigh, isn't it? I'm going to leave that for you to decide. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and as always, keep exploring.